I'm Laura of Cooks Books, and today I'm going to be reviewing Goodnight Stories from Rebel Girls. This book is 100 stories of women who really influenced history, but somehow slid into infamy rather than getting the fame they deserved. Each one is told in the format of a bedtime story or a fairy tale, and each one has a really sweet little illustration to run along with it, because these are supposed to be told to children at night. But adults can enjoy them too. Shh! My first impression of this book is that it is very, very special and very dear to a lot of people's hearts. It actually started life as a Kickstarter, and it is actually the most funded original book in the history of Kickstarter. And when you think about how many people use that platform to self-publish, that is an incredible achievement for such a little book and for such a simple idea. And I think it's because it's a concept that so many people can get behind, men and women alike. Anyone who calls himself a feminist wants to give their children some role models to look up to, wants to give them people who they can emulate to lead a friendly, happy, helpful life. And I feel like this book definitely does that. It's also a very intersectional book. These women aren't just American and British heroines. We have ancient Japanese empresses, we have Irish pirates, we have Olympians, we have artists, we have writers, we have journalists, we have humanitarians from every corner of the world. And I think it really does children a lot of good, especially children who live in Western civilizations, to see that we aren't the only template to be followed. Even I hadn't heard of the vast majority of women in this book, so the sooner we expose children to these stories of these wonderful, wonderful people, the better. Because hearing some of their stories made me feel incredibly lucky to have led the life I had, incredibly grateful, and they also made me feel a little bit braver too. Another pro for this book is just how accessible it is to children. Obviously it's a format they've become used to through Goodnight Stories. It says, "One day there was a girl who," so they understand where that story's going, and it really lets them access what's happening. And because of that simple language, children can use this as a tool to go from listening to their parents read to them to building up their own reading skills. It's just a fantastic tool. Also, the illustrations are a fantastic way into this for the children, and they give them some really beautiful, beautiful visual cues, as well as exposing them to a wide variety of illustration styles from around the world. I do have some issues with this book, however, and one of them is those self-same illustrations that I've just praised. There are 100 stories in this book, yet only 60 illustrators were used. Part of me feels like for every story there should have been a different illustrator, or at least those illustrators should have mixed up the style a little bit. It was very clear when an illustrator had done two, because they were exactly the same, it was just the woman in question who was different. They were drawn in the exact same way, same style, quite often same background. While it's amazing that these illustrators are getting their work produced in a way that so many people will see, I feel that more people would have benefited if they'd done 100 illustrators for 100 stories. Another issue I had with this is there were no explicit LGBT women mentioned in this book, and I feel like the next big step for children's literature is to start introducing characters or people who are queer, because it's really important that we normalise that for children as early as possible. Otherwise, how are we going to progress with the queer rights when we can't even feel safe including their stories, their incredibly heroic stories, in a book like this? I kind of got to the end and wondered if there was a reason we didn't have those stories. Maybe it was to do with the need to get this published. Maybe they thought leaving out certain women would ensure that it would get funded by all different types of people with all different types of belief. I feel like that's a weak excuse if that's the reason, but that's the only excuse I can think of on their behalf. Perhaps some of the women in this book do identify within the LGBTQIA spectrum, but it would have been nice to have a humanitarian story in here about a queer woman, in the same way we had humanitarian stories in here such as Malala, who spoke out for her rights for education. I don't see why we couldn't have had any of the millions of women who have stood up to defend their queer rights and the rights of others. I was also surprised that a lot of the women here were in fact very famous when this has been sold to me as the unsung heroines of the world finally get the airtime they deserve. I mean, Amelia Earhart was in here. I do find her really interesting and I want to know more, but I feel like she's a figure that children find out about very young anyway. I mean, there's a BuzzFeed Unsolved episode about Amelia Earhart. She's not lacking attention from the world. Maybe this space would have been better used to tell the stories of some women who are unheard of. Because the entries I found most interesting were about the women I had never heard about before. They were so exciting and so interesting. And then I got to someone I already knew and I was like, oh, cool. I did have one really big issue with this book. Anyone who's watched any of my non-fiction reviews will know one name comes up very frequently because I read a lot to do with British politics. I wasn't expecting this to be kind of like a British politics heavy book, but that bloody woman is in it, isn't she? I don't deny that Margaret Thatcher achieved a great many things in her premiership. And that's about as diplomatic as I can get on that topic. I couldn't believe that this book, filled with socialist women who strove to achieve their rights and the rights of others, who wanted to break away from their male-imposed roles, those women were there, and they were 99% of this book. And then there was Margaret Thatcher, who has caused more suffering for the people where I am from than any other individual, possibly in the history of Britain. That is a fact. People are still suffering where I live today because of the cruel and divisive and the hateful things this woman did. And you can get into the semantic argument of, well, some of those women who are painted as freedom fighters in this book were seen as terrorists in their home countries, and, you know, they were challenging a system. Margaret Thatcher was challenging a long-running system of people being happy and employed and being able to feed their families and not get beaten to shit by the police on a daily basis. Literally, I don't understand why she was there. With all these women who'd worked so hard to make the world a better place, there was a woman who had destroyed a good chunk of Britain. Maybe one of the incentives for a Kickstarter backer was, if you give me £10,000, you can decide a woman to go in the book. Maybe some psycho gave that much money and said, I would like Margaret Thatcher to be in the book. She's an inspirational, kind, lovely woman who no one's heard of, and, you know, she deserves some more airtime. Genuinely, it ruined the book for me because I was so on board with every single woman. There was a story in here of a girl who had run away from an arranged marriage, and it was so inspiring. And then I realised that she was my exact age, and it really led me to some deep introspection about how privileged my life actually is. That's a fantastic thing to take away from this book. And then you turn a page from having that experience, and you see that bloody woman with a very nice illustration. And I don't know, it kind of, it embittered me to the book a little bit. It withdrew me from the book. And there's actually a sequel that is in production and is being sent to backers as we speak. And that's made me a little bit hesitant to pick it up, because now I'm not 100% sure that I can support the people who make this book, because I know that our ideologies are very different now. Since picking this book up, I have realised that there are many books out there that are similar to this now. You have the series that has Frida Kahlo, Emily Pankhurst, Coco Chanel, I can't remember the name of that series, I think it's Big Ideas, Little People. That's a beautiful set of illustrated books about the lives of really famous women who did a lot for the world. There are the books 100 Women in Science. In children's literature, we are moving forward to expose kids to a really wide variety of important women and feminist icons. Feminism is becoming a much more mainstream tool in children's literature, which is fantastic. But I might suggest that as much as I love this and I gave it 5 stars, you maybe start with one of those first, because I can't fully endorse this book anymore, and I can't endorse its makers. Like I said, initially I gave this 5 stars, but now I'm not sure what the rating is. For the rest of the book, I think I'll give it 4.5 stars now, because my confidence is being knocked. And for Thatcher, no stars. She can go and rot in hell. That's too harsh. I hope she got everything she deserved. Still too harsh. I don't like her. Perfect. That was my review of Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. Who knew a children's storybook could get me quite so politically raggy, which is a technical term. Anyway, if you read this book, I'd be delighted to know what you thought of it and what you thought of that strange entry, if you are even remotely bothered by it like I am. Let me know down in the comments and I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye!